Valorant pro players and the community are kicking off. Again. And again, it has to do with something that Leo Faria has tweeted. But first, an announcement. Yes, my Discord is hosting a Valorant tournament taking place on the weekend of the 3rd and the 4th of Feb, and I will be live streaming the games on the 4th of Feb for the whole world to see. Now, this is for people with an EMEA account and is solo sign-up. You will get placed into a random team that we are trying to balance as best as we can. So don't worry if you are a really low rank or a really high rank. You hopefully will be put in a team that's about the same level as every other team in the tournament. And there will be a prize pool split between the top 3 teams as well, but make sure you're signing up as soon as possible because there is only limited spaces available and it will be on a first come first serve basis. To do so, use the link in the pinned comment and also join the Discord whilst you're there because who knows, we might be hosting more of these things in the future. But now, back to the video. So let's get to these tweets, and essentially it's about the schedule, right? So here's a tweet from someone asking Leo basically like the stage 1 and 2, it's gonna have, 10 regular season matches per team across stage 1 and 2, so 5 matches per stage rather than 10 matches per stage, as I think some people interpret it to be. And Leo said we couldn't do a full round robin within each stage without making the stages too long or going best of 1, which we didn't want. So teams will be divided into 2 groups, and he just explained how they do it. But basically, there will be 2 stages of 5 games rather than 2 stages of 10 games. And then people replied saying, "Give us more games." But then Leo responded to that: "We're expanding the calendar next year to space things out and shorten the off season. But we like the baseline number of matches each team's currently play, and we're not looking to increase that. Ultimately, fans want to see the best teams play more, and those teams make it to global events. At challenges and game changers, there's a lot of Val to watch." Now, a lot of pro players and the community had some thoughts about this, because if you don't do that well this year, you're not going to play that many games. And as Asuna points out, I love playing 13 matches a year. Now, other responses included stuff like this: "Glad I stayed in challenges, so at least I get to play the game," from Xander. And they got VCT players playing less matches than an NFL season, and they get permanent brain damage every Sunday. "I'm done," from Dazzle. And so basically this boils down to that if you don't do well in the season, you will have your 10 regular season games, and then it's very possible that you only play 2 games at this kickoff tournament, and that's your entire season done. You only play 12 games for the entire season. Now the thing is, as some people have pointed out, there were teams last year that did only play 11 games last season. Teams like DFM and MIBR, here's MIBR's schedule of last year. This is all the games they played in VCT Americas and Lock-In. This is 11 games, and that's all they played last year. But as people have rightly pointed out, this feels like, teams could make roster moves based off, 2 official games or something like that, right? And not really give players a chance or enough time to actually show that they do belong and they do deserve to be on a team. But because there's so few games and every game therefore matters so much, if just losing 1 or 2 games could mean that you're out of a job. But to me, a big problem for Riot has come from actually things that they said last year and setting up expectations that have then not come about. Because if we take a look at this, right, when they're talking about, what the 2023 season was going to be like and how it was going to work, listen to what they say.
Next year is going to introduce a new structure with 30 teams competing in 3 new international leagues. In normal years, our plan is to operate 2 international league splits each season. But as teams will be busy setting up in their new global hubs, we're going to take this opportunity to do something special.
Okay, and then they're about to announce Lock-In after this, right? But what they just said essentially was, there's gonna be 2 international league splits, and the only reason we're not doing this first one is because teams are setting up in the new, places where they're gonna play, right? That's what they said, and that's why, we're doing Lock-In for last year. Well, you're not doing Lock-In for this year, but we don't have this, right? And when you put a graphic up like this on the screen that says International League Split 1 and 2, but then you kind of aren't really doing that, and you've replaced this instead with, the kickoff tournament into then Masters Madrid, you can understand why people maybe are frustrated. But on the flip side to that as well, of course, yeah, you've got the teams who aren't going to do very well, obviously aren't going to play as many games if they aren't going to international events and whatnot. But for the teams that do, there's kind of the opposite problem where, last year we've got players like Boaster talking about Burnout, right? And that they had problems. I mean, you see it here. It was just time we win the first 2 events. Other teams are super hungry. We're feeling a bit of pressure from wanting to win all 3 events, and maybe a bit of burnout. You stay until the end of these events, and then you go again, and you go again, and you go again. Maybe some of the teams get knocked out early and have a week's break, but we have no time to recuperate, and we're like, bloody hell, we're straight back into it. Oh my goodness. Do we change comps? No, because we have 2 weeks before the tournament starts. And so there is this dichotomy of, yes, there are teams that won't be playing a ton of games that aren't doing very well, But on the other hand, you've got teams like Fnatic who might be going to the end of every single tournament and don't really have a lot of time off, and they feel like they're constantly preparing and constantly grinding and constantly playing the game. And so it is a difficult balancing act, but last year there was one thing which really helps all of this. It helps the teams that don't play a lot of games play more games, and it helps those teams that do play a lot of games have more rest. But Riot got rid of it. And that's LCQ, because for an LCQ tournament, all of the top teams aren't playing. They're already got to champs. But for the teams in LCQ, it's the teams that haven't gone far in tournaments, that haven't played maybe as many games, and they now get the chance to play more games in this tournament. And so that was a great way of kind of fixing both problems in one, but Riot decided to get rid of it. But to me, there is one major sticking point here that a lot of people just haven't seemed to have mentioned in all of this, and that is that Riot wants to show every single tier 1 game on its own and have no competition with any other Valorant games. And that's fine. And if that's the way they want to do it, then that's a decision they can make. And you can disagree with it. And people bringing up comparisons to, other sports like the NFL or football or whatever, right? Like, yeah, but they play games at the same time, and you can't watch every single game at the same time. And that's how it works. Like, if they didn't do that, their season, for a football season, it literally wouldn't work. You couldn't be able to do that if you didn't play games at the same time, right? So Riot has taken the decision to not do that and not play games at the same time, which I'm sure for the teams themselves, they might even prefer that, because, if you're one of the smaller teams and you're competing with, two bigger teams playing, who's going to watch the two smaller teams play against each other? Probably not many people, right? So if you want to be in this partnership with this team and you want to guarantee that a certain amount of people will watch those games, well then, yeah, you probably need to have it on its own with no other competition. And so Leo there said that he doesn't want to see any more games added to the schedule. And for some of the pro players on some of the lesser teams, that might not be great for them, I will be honest. But from a fan's perspective, there still is going to be quite a bit of Valorant. I don't think people are fully comprehending this. If you just watch your local league, like if you're in NA and you watch the Americas League and just the Americas League, nothing else, and you watch the international games as well, you'll watch roughly 174 games of Valorant. That's quite a lot of Valorant. And if you did want to go crazy Sliggy mode and watch every game, you'll watch roughly 459 games of Valorant, which is a lot of Valorant for just tier 1. But is there a realistic way where they could actually add more games? Well, for the international league splits and maybe the international tournaments, probably not, to be honest. Obviously, we're getting an extra team with Ascension, so that is one more game in the international leagues. But where I think that they could maybe squeeze out a couple more games is actually if they do a kickoff tournament like this again. And look, I think that we will stick with this kind of schedule, right? That they realize that they don't have enough time to do the full league splits, so they're going to do this kind of tournament. But we don't have to do it in this way, right? There are better ways if we want to have more games of doing this, right? For instance, these groups, instead of being a double elim, these could be round robin groups, right? I don't really see why you couldn't do that, right? And that's an extra game for these teams, right? Just straight off the bat. Also, we could do this, so for instance, in this year, rather than eliminating like 2 teams from the groups of 4 and 1 team from the group of 3, you could have just eliminated the bottom team from each group and then said that, we're going to do an 8-team double elim bracket, right? We start with 11 teams, 3 groups, eliminate the worst team from each group. We've got 8 teams, do a full double elim bracket, and again, most of the teams are playing a lot more games. And one little thing that I think some people might be misinterpreting as well from a fan's perspective is, at least for me, I saw as much MIBR as I needed to last year. I didn't need to watch any more MIBR. I was happy with the amount of MIBR I watched. And the same true for DFM as well, right? That it's only the worst teams that are not going to be playing many games. As soon as you go to the playoffs, you're playing more games. As soon as you go to an international event, you're playing more games, right? So it's really only for these teams that aren't very good that are going to be playing the small amount of games. And one last thing here as well is that Leo does say that, ad challenges and game changers, there's a lot of Val to watch. And this is a point that, again, we've seen a lot of people complain about tier 2 viewership and game changers viewership, that Riot aren't promoting it as much as they should be. Well, not having as many tier 1 games means that more people are more likely to watch tier 2 and game changers, which is what people have complained about before. So pick a lane. Do you want tier 2 to be okay or not? Because it doesn't seem like it if you want constant tier 1 games, because who's going to be watching tier 2 if tier 1 is on all the time? And so I'm interested to see what some of you guys think in the comments down below. I know that some of you will just be frothing at the mouth because a pro player is angry. And for some of the pros, I do think that it's not an ideal situation. But actually for the fans, I actually think it's not that bad. And it's not really a problem necessarily if you are just a fan of the sport.